This morning.
Okay, folks,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the sound system is in a state of rigor mortis, kind of like me. So if I yell, can everybody in this room hear me? Rock and roll. There is a sign-in sheet. It's being passed around right about now like a free crack pipe. Please print your name, print your brand, and get the sign-in sheet back up to me. The wonderful people in Washington and ICE and the FBI, they really need this information. No, I'm kidding. All right.
Need to know where you are.
Elvis. So anyway, for those, I see a few familiar faces here, quite a few non-familiar faces, and this is good. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Andrew Barry, which nobody will remember. I am better known just as Doc. And that's a nickname given to me many, many years ago by the Marines and the corpsmen. I was not a medic. I was not a Navy corpsman. They just started calling me Doc. And they also called me brother to this day. And you can imagine how that makes a guy feel, right? I'm a psychologist and psychoanalyst, and I specialize in working with veterans and first responders, battling with post-traumatic stress disorder. It's all I do. I'm in private practice in a little place you've never heard of. It's part of Schenectady called Niskayuna. And I realize that sounds like something you do to a chicken. I can assure you that it is not. And I see upwards of 40 to 45 patients every week. And most of them are vets and first responders. Before I get going on this, I believe I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the 40 and 8 for cutting me loose like they have. I did this talk last year. They invited me back this year to do it again. All I'll tell you is umpty years ago, when American Legion opened its doors to anybody with any length of service, I became a life member. The same thing for AMVETS and all the mainstream veterans organizations out there. And I started firing off emails, resumes, phone calls, asking to do what I am doing here with you folks. I've done it coast to coast. I've done webcasting. I've done podcasting. I've gotten a national and international track record of doing this sort of thing. And nobody listened to me until I came to the 40 and 8. And the individual who invited me to the 40 and 8 is here with us today. He's never been to a national prom before. Kenny Ellis. Thank you for inviting me to this organization. My info, yes, he is to blame.
I'm sorry, everyone.
My info then was passed on to Frank Cronin, past Big Chef Frank Cronin, who passed my information on to my mentor, Wayne Sorrentino. Thank you, Wayne, for everything
It's
you've done.
deep now when you mention Wayne.
Oh yeah, I'll try and get the Watson helmet later. But along the way,
Save the watch.
all right. But along the way, I met the past big chefs as well: Ted Lang, John DiGilio, Frank Campo, Ted Lang, and they have all been so encouraging to this and open to this kind of presentation. And I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to all of them. I was elected fellow of the American Psychological Association about a month ago. And what that means in plain English is, to be elected fellow, you have to show national and even international impact with your work. And being appointed a national officer of the 40 and 8 and being allowed to do this was a major step forward in becoming elected fellow. Gentlemen, ladies, boys, yours, Dan's, brothers and sisters, getting elected fellow is not just my victory. It's a victory for us all, because what it's going to allow me to do is to advocate for you guys on higher and higher levels. And already the phone's ringing. So thank you all, and to the people I named specifically. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder and other fun topics first thing in the morning. For those of you who have attended these kinds of presentations before, I do not do this in, shall we say, a Kool-Aid typical way. I do not read off a bunch of symptoms using $10 words out of the DSM. that leave people just bored out of their minds, puts people to sleep. It's my job to wake everybody up. And so what I do when I do this sort of thing is I use a storytelling approach. I don't use any of the psychobabble or jargon, but what I do is I tell stories, and I include all the symptoms of PTSD and make it understandable, make it relatable. So since I am a storyteller, why not start off with a story? This is a story that is perhaps apocryphal, could have happened last year, last month, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, here in the United States or any other country around the world. And it seems that a man and his young family were walking through the woods from one place to the other. Nobody knows where. It's not important, not unusual. They're out doing whatever it is or whatever it was they were doing. And in the woods, some bad things can happen. And out of nowhere came a predator, presumably a wolf, something like that. And the wolf sees this young family, defenseless, and figures he's going to get himself a real good hot meal, and it's game on. But before he can make his approach, a sheepdog comes out of nowhere and sees what's about to go down. And I'm not talking about an English sheepdog. I'm talking about a sheepdog that by breeding, by genetics, by the hand of God, protects the herd. And that sheepdog placed himself between the family and the predator, and it was game on. And by the time it was over, the predator was dead, the family was untouched, and that sheepdog, yes, that hero, was hanging on by a thread. There wasn't much left of that dog. And so the father, so the story goes, starts getting his family together and starts walking away. And the mother or one of the kids, doesn't matter who, says to the father, "Well, what about the dog? He just saved us all." And the father was reputed to have said, "Yeah, but he's just a dog." And I noticed the emotional temperature went down as soon as I said that. I'm pretty sure, thank you, John. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room can figure out why I told you that story. So many of the bravest of the brave who come out of all four corners of the United States sign on the dotted line and get assigned to doing some pretty horrific jobs in countries we've never heard of. They come back to a country that just doesn't care, denies their service, etc. And I see that every day in my consulting room. Now, I can see we've got a few folks in this room who've been around the sun a few times, like I have. From our generation, we remember our fathers and grandfathers used to. They were the ones running the country, the greatest generation, right? They survived the Depression, got plunged into World War II, came back victorious, were given an industrial strength GI Bill, ticker tape parades, and they were treated as heroes. Not quite so much for the guys who fought in the Korean War, also known as the Forgotten War, criminally, to say nothing of those who served during Vietnam. Just give me a show of hands here. How many of you guys served in Vietnam? Show of hands, please. About 2/3, 3/4 of you. Good enough. I was 12 years old when Vietnam ended. All right. And thanks to the popular media, thanks to the crappy movies, thanks to the crappy news shows, Vietnam veterans were demonized and misrepresented so badly. I admit I was initially kind of afraid of Vietnam veterans, and it was all senseless. Those guys came back to absolute garbage. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say that. But I will tell you this, I was doing this talk in front of a group of, it was a Vietnam vets organization. And after I got done bellowing, as I am right now, the president came up afterward and said to me, geez, Doc, where the hell were you 50 years when I got back? And I said, well, listen, I was 12 when it ended, but I got here as fast as I could. Tell me about the pain. And on my way to my seat, one of the guys stood up. He was about that big around. He was shriveled down to nothing, probably Agent Orange. God knows combat, yes. And he looked up at me, what was left of him, and he said, you know something, Doc? My mom asked me why I wasn't the same person when I went in. And all I could think of to say to this warrior, this combat veteran, as I squeezed his hand in both of mine, I said, she simply did not understand. But I'm glad you and I are here right now having this conversation.
Doc,
True story.
how many people do you see that are labeled with personality disorders rather than PTSD?
None. Not by the time they get to me.
Okay.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Can we do questions at the end, folks? Because
Okay.
once I get rolling, I'm easy to throw off track. I will answer that. So anyway, so this is a talk today about the old veteran, and I'm going to tell you why I use that. It's a term of convenience. Doesn't necessarily have to be it doesn't have to be an old veteran. Can be young, can be male, can be female, any rank, any branch of the armed services can become symptomatic because they have experienced something absolutely god-awful that no human being, they've seen things, heard things, and had to do things that no human being should ever go through. And speaking of Vietnam vets, I'm going to tell you another story. I started my career as a diagnostician in a state-run supermax out in Kansas. That's a hell of a way to start a career, right? And it was my job to read a guy's rap sheet, read the inmate's rap sheets, interview him for an hour, and check out his testing, suggest programs, type up a report, and send him on his way, which has nothing whatsoever to do with mental health and everything whatsoever to do with fast food, classification, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, treat him and street him, get him out of my office. One day, in came a Vietnam veteran. And I checked his rap sheet, and every charge on that was alcohol related. DWI, DWI, domestic violence, DWI, et cetera, et cetera. And he finally caught his first federal charge. He drank his way out of his own life. And we have heard this Gothic horror tale many, many times over. So here was an example of it sitting right before me. Now, when it comes to the combat guys, one of my main questions to ask is, who do you miss the most? Right? Who do you miss the most? And normally what they'll tell me is they've lost a brother or even a sister in battle, killed right in front of them, cut in half by machine gun fire, blown up, burned up, etc. But what this guy, this anonymous Vietnam veteran told me that day was a clinical gift that was priceless. It was a free gift to me, and I'm going to give it to you this day. So I asked him my question. I said, who do you miss the most? And the color surged to his face. The veins were sticking out of his neck and his forehead. He burst into tears, and he half shouted at me. He says, Doc, I miss me. I used to be a nice guy. And if you guys get nothing more out of this talk, please get that at least. And I'm going to repeat it. I asked this guy, who do you miss the most? And he said, I miss me. I used to be a nice guy. And that simple sentence, my friends, it's a simple sentence, but there are so many layers to it. It is so profound. It goes so deep. It's taken me 20 years to unpack the meaning of that single sentence. And I'm still unpacking it to this day. And what it suggested to me is that this poor bastard, and so many of them like him and her, went into the service as person A, and they came out the other side of their service as person B. This poor guy had absolutely no idea who he even was anymore. This guy had no idea what mattered. This guy was lost. He was unmoored and just drifting through life. And the only thing he was interested in is making the pain go away by grabbing that next drink. And he's probably dead by now by his own hand. Why do I say that? Because the highest suicide rates currently, guess what? For the Vietnam guys. And it's appalling. Now, what a lot of people don't know about post-traumatic stress is that when a person has been traumatized repeatedly for a long enough period of time, and it's different for everybody, right? When they are exposed to being shot at, when they are exposed to the screams, when they are exposed to the smells of gunpowder, burning hair, burning flesh, when they are exposed to adrenaline blasts that go on seemingly for hours, when they are exposed to profound sleep loss, days or even weeks. Guess what, folks? It changes the central nervous system's composition. In plainer English than that, the brain changes. The physiology of the brain changes. And the biochemistry of the brain changes. Without getting too far into the weeds, the amygdala, which is where our fight or flight instinct is, gets bigger. This is called brain plasticity, by the way. And the hippocampus, which slows everything down, and to a civil level, if you will, gets smaller. In other words, through repeated trauma, this poor bastard's brain is set in so many ways, at least for the time being, on permanent high alert. Is it any wonder? It's a survival mechanism. I'll get back to that in a minute. Now, since the central nervous system is affected, since the brain changes, since the biochemistry and physiology of the brain changes, now, what was I saying a couple of minutes ago about the Vietnam vet who said, I miss me? I used to be a nice guy. I can virtually guarantee you, I would bet a paycheck that that guy's brain was different when he left the service compared with when he went in. And I'm not talking about different because of normal maturing and aging. This guy's brain was changed by combat. And the accompanying terrible memories, the sleep loss, the rage, the fits, the physical violence, the emotional violence, unfinished business, all of it. See where this is going, folks? Heads are going up and down. Good. Nobody's falling asleep yet. Go as fast as I can. And how many of you guys have read in the obituaries somebody like an old retired fire chief, or somebody who was in the military for a long time, or somebody who's done both? Is that a question or? Okay. Let me get to the point first, and then I'll see your hand go up. And in the obituary or the retirement notice, it will say something like a lifetime of service. You guys ever see that phrase before? A lifetime of service. And on the surface, not the service, but on the surface, that's a very motivating thing to say. A lifetime of service pumps my nads and makes me want to re-enlist, God knows. Very motivating. A lifetime of service. We thank God for such men. But if we think a little deeper, the darker side of a lifetime of service is quite possibly a lifetime of periodic exposures to intense trauma. And what if the guy or gal who gave a lifetime of service comes from a family where there has been child abuse? What if that kid, male or female, what if his parents were alcoholics, drug addicts? What if they were beating on him? What if they were not even there at all? Do you see how far back this can go? Can you see how it sets the stage for somebody going into the service? Because they're trying to become part of a family that they believe is better than the family or the area or the life or the part of the world where they came from. And it goes on and on and on. So a lot of people who get out go into law enforcement, fire prevention, EMS, corrections, dispatch, etc. And the disease goes merrily on. Now, hardest thing this old veteran has ever done in his life or her life is to pick up the phone and ask for help. Why is that? Well, because we were trained not to. It's essential for mission completion. We were trained, vets and first responders, to think of everybody else around us absolutely first and ourselves last, if at all. We don't want to ask for help because we don't want to be that guy. We don't want the social pressure. We don't want to be the weak link in the chain. So we suck it down, we suck it down, we suck it down. And it's essential for mission completion. I get it. But make no mistake, folks, there is an enormous price to pay for that. And that's where I come in when they've gotten out of the service and they have no idea what the hell to do, nor do they have any idea about the forces raging inside them. Now, as far as asking for help, I'll veer off for a moment. One of my Marines, and his first name is Joe Marine. Who'd have thought? We've never heard that before. With that magnificent New York City accent of his, combat attached to recon, he says, you know, Doc, I fucking hate to ask for help. And I said, oh, really? I said, okay. I said to him, and been friends for 20 years now almost, and I said, you told me I can ask you anything about combat. And he said, what do you want to know? I'll tell you anything you want to know. And I said, okay, I'm going to give you a scenario. Let's say you're out in the dunes, you're out in the bush, you know the bad guys are going to come around the corner in about 5 minutes. Your weapon's jammed and you don't even have any ordnance, but you got a working radio. So what's the first thing you're going to do? And he said, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up that goddamn radio and then he looked at me and he said, you son of a bitch. And I said, you mean you're going to ask for help? He starts laughing, goes, yeah, you fucking a major point. And I said, I love you too. True story. And now he tells that story often to those guys he served with. There is no difference between asking for help out in the jungles, out in the bush, out in the dunes, or asking for help here. The mission continues, even though the uniforms may no longer be worn. Right? So this old vet is dealing with intrusive thoughts. What do you mean when you say intrusive thoughts, Doc? I'm glad you asked. They complete their tours of duty and they can go for months, years, without thinking about their service. And all of a sudden, the stuff they had to do starts to surface in their minds. It comes back to life, if you will. All right. And initially, this guy or gal thinks that they're going crazy. I haven't thought about this shit for years. I just tried to put it in a box and come home and become normal again. Oh, and by the way, while we're at it, that's why they call this post-traumatic stress disorder. That makes sense to everybody in this room, I hope? That's how this shit works. And it's never bothered them before. And they think to themselves, well, I must be weak, so I've got to work harder. I'm not worthy, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not going to be the one to ask for help. Oh, hell no. One of my cops, I realize this is for vets, but he was a Marine combat guy, told me the thought that wakes him up several times a week is when a young girl was burning up in a car. Now, this didn't happen when he was in the service, but it happened when he was a road cop. And he said, I can see her face, I can hear her scream, I can smell the burning, and it comes at me. And I have no control over it. Those are intrusive thoughts. One of the things we notice about this old vet is that he or she is tired all the time. Can you say chronic sleep loss? I knew you could, right? These men and women are so plagued by racing thoughts and by nightmares. And when I say nightmares, I'm talking about nightmares that are like nightmares times 10 to the 23rd with raisins mixed in. Terrors of what they've seen repeatedly throughout the night. And after a while, they're afraid to go to sleep because they don't want to endure the same terrible nightmare. Right? Is it any wonder they are so sleep deprived? And I'm here to tell you, I happen to be in my clinic and I happen to be in this room with you people, a big proponent of sleep hygiene. Because when you lose enough sleep over a long enough period of time, it aggravates the living bejesus out of anxiety, depression, and all the other symptoms. You have to put the energy back in the cell that you took out. It's as simple as that. All right. Now, another thing this whole vet will do is he will avoid reminders of that event. Okay. Such as news items, like on Memorial Day. This old veteran will avoid looking at the news, looking at the newspapers because of the memories that come up. This old veteran will do everything he possibly can to steer clear. And it's an understandable impulse. Why do we want to look at something or talk about something that's painful? Let's steer clear of it and not talk about it. While it's understandable, look at the price that's eventually paid. And what I'm about to tell you guys is it's pretty simple. And this is way above my pay grade. Okay, what I'm about to tell you, I didn't think this up. I'm not that smart. When you open your mouth, the pain comes out at long last. When you open your mouth, finally, the pain comes out. And I can't tell you how many guys have come to my consulting room, wound up tighter than a snare drum because they feel they have no place to go and they finally spill it. And at the end of session, that initial session, sometimes when they're in tears, I'll ask them at the end of session, how do you feel now as compared with when you first came in? And they look up at me and they say, you know, Doc, I feel strangely relieved, as if the thought had never occurred to them, because they believe somehow that talking about it is going to make it worse. And lo and behold, it makes it better. And I tell all of those men and women I see in my consulting room, and I also tell all of the people in this room, every time you tell your story, you take power back from that story. Because initially, folks will get out, they won't talk about their service for years or even decades because what they went through holds an incredible power over them until they just can't bear to go on. And they notice the more they speak, the more they can tell their story. Slowly over time, the better they feel. That first time is the hardest because guess what? They've never talked about it before. In other words, they've been through something absolutely awful and they've never put words to it before. What happens when they finally do? When they finally put words to it, when they finally speak of it aloud, the memories become real. Yes, this really happened to you. And I'm going to tell you something else too. I'm very open with the men and women that I work with. I'll tell them I have a short tour in the Marine Corps and an honorable discharge. I do not have any combat experience. And when I was first responder, I did the volunteer firefighting and EMT thing for about 4.5, 5 years. I didn't see hardly anything. I put the cards on the table. These men and women have a right to know who and what they are drinking with. It's called establishing trust. For whatever reason, though, even after I tell them that, these men and women speak, it takes them sometimes a while, openly about what they have seen in combat, what they have seen as first responders out on the road. And I make it clear to them, I make it very, very clear to them that when they can put words to that for the very first time with me, I am well aware that it is tantamount to that veteran, male or female, or that first responder, or both, that they have given me a piece of their soul. I am well aware of the size of what they have given, the trust they have put in me. And that's the road to recovery, folks, is being able to finally talk about it. Another thing this old vet starts noticing after a while is memory loss. Memory loss. The more the years go by, it's perfectly normal, totally normal. How many of you guys have heard the expression the fog of war? Show of hands. About half? Oh, most of you, okay. You've read it before. And what it speaks to is you can witness something absolutely god awful on the battlefield, and your buddy who's sitting right next to you may have a completely different recollection of that battle. And is it any wonder when the guys get together 10, 20, 30 years after these battles and they start comparing notes, how helpful it is to fill in those gaps of memory and to understand that there are different perspectives of what the holy hell they went through, what they survived, and how they will continue to survive together. That makes sense to everybody? I hope. Okay. All right. This old veteran tends to be rather, shall we say, pessimistic, right? Lived with depression for so long and has seen so much of man's inhumanity to man that often the negativity can be overwhelming. They're constantly complaining. You never see a smile on their faces. One of the many, many, many scars of war are those negative thoughts, which are like a plague to be around. You imagine how that affects relationships with kids, with wives, family members. It just rots those relationships away because it's like being in the presence of an emotional vampire. They're just so negative. Another thing about this old vet is that he wants, or she wants, to be alone. They isolate. All right. They don't work and play well with others, shall we say. They don't like being around other people other than, what a surprise, other veterans and first responders, because they feel understood by other veterans and first responders. They do not feel understood by civilians. These men and women have been repeatedly in life and death situations and simply cannot identify with John Q. Taxpayer, who is complaining about not having the latest iPhone, the newest car, or the coolest sneakers. They feel like outsiders in the country that they went to defend. We notice that this old vet has periodically quite a temper. Major anger issues, major rage issues. A retired light colonel told me, he put in 30 years in the Army, and he said to me in passing one day, my wife and kids just don't understand why I'm such a miserable bastard to be around all the time. And I tried to tell him, unfortunately, that's par for the course. And a way of thinking about the anger and irritability is that it's a trauma response. Sometimes what we see covers the actual emotion. I'm going to give you guys something real heavy to think about. What if when this old veteran, male or female, was blowing a stack, it looks like anger? What if on a deeper level, he or she is actually crying? Let that idea hang in the air. But tears are not proper. Tears are not welcome. Us dumb American males are allowed to show anger, no emotion whatsoever, or stupid humor. Do you ever notice that? But when we show tears, when we show that softer side, that sentimental side, we are ostracized because we are not manly. Right? Now, before I get into these symptoms any further, I want to make one thing very, very clear. To these veterans and to anybody in this room who's fighting with any degree of what I'm talking about here to you today, please listen to me when I tell you, sir or ma'am, you're not crazy. You're not weak. You are reacting perfectly normally to an unbelievably abnormal set of circumstances that defies description. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're just in pain. Humanize yourself. Allow yourself to admit that out loud. That this shit hurts. And I need help. I can't make it any plainer than that. This old vet used to have a lot of hobbies before he went into service. He enjoyed going to the shooting range, hanging out with his wife and kids, going to restaurants, living, shall we say, a normal life, whatever the hell that is, right? But at the end of service, those once enjoyable activities are simply not enjoyable anymore. I had one guy who told me, with tears rolling down his face, that when his grandkids ask him to go out and play, he does his very, very best to go out and enjoy the years, the irreplaceable years that he has with them. But all the while, in addition to being outside and trying to focus on them, he's looking for the enemy. He finds it exhausting to have to deal with that. And he said, I want to be with the grandkids, but I can't wait for them to get out of the house, he told me one day, because I am so exhausted. I can't enjoy like everybody else can. And that also, folks, is par for the course. Yes, indeed, it's normal. So let's have a conversation about what's known as hypervigilance, okay? This old veteran is constantly on high alert, waiting for attack. Do you ever notice this is the guy who goes to a restaurant and has to sit with his back to the wall where he can see all the doors, where you can see out the windows, where you can count the number of people coming in and going out. He's watching people's hands. He's watching everything while his meal gets cold. Last time I knew, going to a restaurant, while costly these days, was supposed to be sort of enjoyable. Not necessarily for this guy, because he's waiting, or she is waiting, for the next attack. Right? The head on the swivel, as we were taught in the world of first responders. You're constantly, and it's essential for mission completion. It's essential for survival. All right. But I'm here to tell you, it requires a great deal of emotional bandwidth, and there's a huge price to pay for that. Another thing I'll tell you, let me just see here. It's on another page. All right, we'll get to that in a little while. How many of you guys have run into somebody who you know has served in combat, who goes through periods of having difficulty concentrating? See, yep. Okay, good. Thank you. I so welcome people who spontaneously raise their hands. You know, that really helps me, and it helps the guy next to you who's not raising his hand. Maybe he doesn't feel so alone. Thank you. Now, the whole difficulty concentrating thing, this is a guy who will all of a sudden be staring off into space for 30 seconds to a minute. This is a guy who has to constantly look at his shopping list because he can't remember what he just read a few seconds before. This is a guy or gal who constantly forgets where he put his glasses. The simplest of everyday tasks become increasingly difficult because of concentration difficulties. Right? Flashbacks. Flashbacks are a bitch. Flashback is a psychotic episode. I'm going to tell you what the word psychosis means. All right. Psychosis means any one or more of your five senses: sight, smell, taste, touch, right? Any one or more of your five senses is registering input from the environment that simply isn't there. And a flashback in the case of a veteran is when he's doing whatever around the house or out in the neighborhood in his backyard. And all of a sudden he gets a feeling that he's back in Vietnam or back in the dunes, looks around, and then just as quickly as he was transported back there, he transports back here. Can you imagine going through that for the very first time and nobody explains it to you? Is it any wonder when this guy or gal goes through something like this for the very first time, they feel like they are losing their mind? There is an ongoing pattern here with everything I've talked about. You guys may have noticed, as the symptoms get worse and worse, and nobody's there like me or one of you to explain it to them, this poor guy, this poor gal feels as though they're losing their mind and they are going crazy. All right. Let's also talk about triggers here for a moment. Triggers. I'm going to tell you what the most powerful trigger is from what I've seen is odors. Odors. All right. A lot of years ago, my family and I were heading down through to South Carolina to go on vacation. And we visited one of my Vietnam Marines, a lovely old gentleman who insisted on taking us out for a magnificent steak dinner. His name is Paulie. He is no longer with us. God rest him. And I said, "Hey, Paulie, where do you want to sit?" And he knew exactly what I was doing. And he looks a little bit of a guy. He looks up at me. He says, "Don't worry about it, Doc. I'll sit any place. I'll sit on the floor. I'll sit over there, over there. I'll sit on the ceiling. I don't give a shit." And I said, "Okay, and he said, but he says, with me, it smells. If I smell like rotting vegetation, I have to flee the scene." And I said to Polly that day, I said, "I'm very glad you told me. That took guts to tell me. And let us just hope and pray that the salads in this place are fresh." Yes, we can laugh here. Another guy came back home from God knows where, a stand, and went to a barbecue. And last time I knew, barbecues are supposed to be fun, aren't they? But he goes to this barbecue. He'd been to barbecues before. And after a while, after the burgers start cooking and everything else, he has to get the hell out of there. Anybody know why, as far as odors go?
Burning flesh.
Yeah, burning flesh. After all, at the end of the day, not to get too gross on anybody at this hour of the day, because we're going into lunch. Well, what's a hamburger? It's burning flesh. And he thought he was losing his mind until somebody explained it to him. No, you're reacting, well, what did I say before? Perfectly normally to an unbelievably abnormal set of circumstances. And now it took a lot of rehearsal, but he can actually enjoy barbecues once again. Sounds can be incredible triggers. Anybody in this room ever notice that the old vet does not all of them, but many of them don't particularly care for a holiday known as Independence Day, aka the 4th of July? Yeah, I got a hand going up there. Thank you, sir. Yeah, thank you. Oh, more, great. Another one. You guys are great. Thanks for participating. It really does help. Fireworks. Holy sweet Jesus, mother of God. Those things go off as somebody shoots off an M80 in the middle of nowhere, and the poor guy or gal dives under his bed, puking his guts out. He's got sound canceling headphones on. And again, he's back in combat. So it's a combination of a trigger that turns into a flashback. This shit is terrible. And again, I have to go to great lengths to point out it's normal. It sucks to go through it, yes, but it's normal. Please, please, please don't beat yourself up. You're not weak. You're not crazy. You're reacting normally. Okay? This old veteran, when he or she experiences something terrible, they relive that incident again and again and again in their mind. Part of it is survivor's guilt. Why did I get to come home and my brother Why was my brother killed? Why was I allowed to survive? And they start blaming themselves. Listen, he'd still be alive if I was there 5 seconds later. He'd still be alive if I was in front of him instead of by his side. He'd still be alive. They blame themselves. They blame themselves needlessly. And that's another example of you reacted in the moment as normally as you possibly could. And that's a very hard sell. But, and that's when the phone rang, $10 fine. Now, anyway. But as far as survivor guilt goes, I am fortunate enough to do a webcast every other Sunday night with two combat guys, and we call ourselves two docs and a grunt. All right. And no, I'm serious. Depending on the evening, I'm doc number 1 or doc number 2. And the other doc is an individual by the name of Luis Fonseca. And if you don't know the name Luis Fonseca, look him up. He is the most decorated Navy corpsman alive today. He retired out after 22 years. He received the Navy Cross for his actions at the Battle of Al-Nasiriyah. And when you read his citation, you swear you're reading about Superman. He's the nicest guy in the world. And he's very open, so I'm not stealing his story. He would have no problem knowing him as I do. He is very open. For him, PTSD is survivor guilt. On that day, he saved like 5, 6, 7 Marines. You can read about it for yourselves, but what's not in the citation is he said 18 guys were killed that day. And I couldn't do a goddamn thing to save them. And those men, he said, this award, I'm honored to have this award. I am deeply honored to have this award, but I don't hold it for me, I hold it for them. Luis has a challenge coin, by the way. And the initials of all 18 of those men killed are etched on the rim of that challenge coin. He does it in memory of them. He brings meaning to their existence. He remembers them. That's part of his healing journey. Through alcoholism, drug addiction, almost getting kicked out of the Navy. That is his biggest part of PTSD is survivor's guilt. The old veteran often has a very difficult time feeling positive emotions. You ever notice a lot of the combat guys are grumpy old men before their time? Maybe I'm in a room full of them for all I know. All right. But it's real hard to have a smile on your face with the brain chemistry changing, the memories of combat, the intrusive thoughts, the crappy sleep, not being understood by family, having very few friends, etc., etc. I mean, where's the joy? I've had guys say, what do I have to live for? The only thing that's in my head, in my life now, are the memories of that god-awful war. And the guys killed right around me. And I have a very hard job trying to help them find things that do matter to them going forward. It's like a veteran comes to me as person A, and then we have to figure out who this veteran is as person B. Veteran, shall we say, 2.0. It's a real good time to mention that the healing process is different for everybody. Post-trauma. One size does not fit all. Some guys get into gardening, some guys get into carpentry, woodworking, painting. I'm fortunate enough to know quite a few artists who are combat veterans, including my friend of 20 years, a guy by the name of Gunny Wolf, Charles Wolf, Gunnery Sergeant Charles Wolf. He is to the Marine Corps today what Bill Malden was to the troops in World War II. He's a cartoonist, and he does a strip called Semper Tunes. It's humor in life in the Marine Corps. So the point of me telling you that is, don't be afraid to try different things to help you recover. Hunting, fishing, etc. Again, one size does not fit all. You have to be okay with experimenting. Right? Any of this making sense, people? Okay, we're all breathing. All right. A long time ago, one of my corpsmen and I were walking out on the street one time. And a guy drives by with a very loud hot rod, and he downshifts, and there's a huge backfire. You got it. My buddy, the corpsman, was on the deck on his stomach. This poor guy was so embarrassed. And I helped him to his feet, and I said, brother, do not be embarrassed. You didn't hear an engine backfiring. You heard somebody shooting at you. It's called an exaggerated startle response. When somebody just closes a door, like the guy will jump. Not slam the door, just close it normally. And most of us who haven't been through that will just turn to see who walked in. He's like, that's exaggerated startle response. Almost done, folks. How are we doing on time? All right. So, in the worst case scenario that we're all trying to avoid, this is what it looks like. All these memories are coming back to me. I don't understand. I thought I left this shit behind me. I can't sleep anymore. I have no idea what's going on. I feel like I'm losing my mind. That 12-pack of beer looks really good right now. My wife and kids, I'm on my third wife, she can't stand me. My kids can't stand me. I've been fired from 3 jobs. I cannot deal with this anymore. And the pressure builds and builds and builds. We all know what happens next. I am not saying that this whole veteran wants to die. I'm not saying that at all. I'm going to introduce you to a new idea. It's that he doesn't or she doesn't want to live. And the difference between the two is the pain is so great, the agony is so great, the hopelessness is so great that their focus on their life, their focus becomes so narrow, they cannot see any life, any way out of the pain. So what they are doing is not to die, but to escape pain. I can't make it any plainer than that for you. All right. And so he finds a length of rope or a gun. It's finished. You hear about it through relatives in the newspapers. And I've said it on many times, I'm sure you guys have too. Oh my God, what have you done? What have you done? And I will go, my friends, I will go on record this day as saying it all could have been avoided. It all could have been avoided if this guy or gal would finally open up their mouth and start letting that pain out. Right? Why does this mean so much to me? Well, one of the answers is, have you guys ever seen those American flags with the thin colored lines on, a thin red line, a thin green line, a thin yellow? I got one of those in my office. Those thinly colored lines are for all of the types of first responders that are out there, as well as the military. And I'm here to tell you, those thin colored lines are getting thinner by the day. By the bloody day. Nobody wants to do these jobs anymore. All right. I'm from New York, which is why I talk funny. Okay. And New York State Police, the troopers, that was the gold standard. Years ago, when they announced a civil service exam every 2 years, there would be like 20,000 people applying. And now I think the numbers are down to between 4,000 and 5,000. They've changed the educational requirements, lowered the age. They're taking anybody they possibly can now. Nobody wants to do these jobs that were once revered in our communities. To me, folks, this is a problem. This is a serious problem of national security. Just my opinion. And that's why we really, really have to do something about it. Enrollments in the military, I heard they're going up. Personally, I'll have to see a lot more before it will leave. But then again, this comes from the news, and we all know the news always tells the truth, don't we?
Right.
Right. One more story. We'll pack it up. And I've told this story many times. This is not a patient of mine, and he's very open about it. He's one of my recon Marines, and if anybody doesn't know in this room what recon means, it's for reconnaissance. These are the tip of the spear in the Marine Corps. These are the guys who are known as swift, silent, deadly. And I met him on a website. Never had a phone conversation with him before. And this is a true story with God as my witness. And I don't know if it's anything. And he liked the stuff I was writing. He and I exchanged messages. He's down in North Carolina. And Christmas Eve, 2006, Christmas Eve. I'm at my in-laws' church, and I'm one of these idiots who can never completely unplug. All right. I'm kind of like my all-time military hero is Hawkeye Pierce from MASH. There's a guy who could never unplug. And I'm here to tell you guys, if there wasn't a Hawkeye Pierce, there wouldn't have been a Doc Berry. And the guy who played him, Alan Alda, I got a chance to tell him that to his face one day. It was a great day. But anyway, phone goes off in my ear, and it's my buddy. And it seems that on Christmas Eve, he and his wife and their 6 kids, I want you to keep that number in mind, 6 kids, all his, all hers, one marriage, were heading up from the south to the north, snowbound someplace here in Pennsylvania, what a thought. And the van he was driving starts to overheat, and being the self-sufficient jarhead that he is, pulls it over, pops a hood, tries to fix it himself. He jiggles the radiator cap and catches a whiff of antifreeze, and boom, he's back in Iraq. And from what he told me, talk about flashbacks, talk about dry heaves, talk about running in place, calisthenics, climbing trees. His mind exploded that day. And so by the time he finally got to me, his wife and kid and 6 kids were elsewhere, wondering if Daddy was going to be alive, because he had a phone in one hand, talking to me, and a gun in the other. This is a true story. And all I did was listen to him. I just listened. I did not do anything brilliant. No. All I did for him that day was just to listen to him. He wanted to be heard. And veterans, by God, they want to be heard. They don't want to be judged. And this was an example of that. And he just spilled it out. He spilled it out. He spilled it out. What was I saying a few minutes ago about, yeah, you open your mouth and the pain comes out? He couldn't bring himself to tell anybody. And he told me that every guy he served with, it went to voicemail, because it's Christmas Eve, nobody's picking up. So at the end, maybe 20, 25 minutes, I could hear he was in a better place. So I said to him, I said, hey man, are you safe? And he responded to me with that magnificent North Carolina drawl of his. He said, yeah, Doc, yeah, I'm safe. And I said, listen, fucker, are you safe? And I have to be the mental health gunny with these guys, otherwise they don't take me seriously. And he said, yeah, Doc, I'm safe. And I said, all right. What choice I got? I'm going to have to trust you. But at the end of services, I'm going to text you, and you better text me back within 2 minutes, or I will call 911 down on your shit. None of this bullshit on my watch. Get it? Yes, sir. And I checked in on him throughout the week. he's alive and well, or as well as he can be. And the punchline to this story is, well, before I get to the punchline, I'll tell you. First time I met him was in 2014. And my wife and I and our two kids were heading down through North Carolina to South Carolina to go on vacation. And so we stopped off and visited the man himself. And pull in, and he opens the front hatchway. He doesn't even say anything, he just bear hugs me. And then he invites me and my wife and my two kids to meet his wife and their 10 kids. Went from 6, now we got 10 here. Folks, we've got a football squad here. Good grief. I urged this man to invest in birth control. Did he listen to me? No. In one ear and out the rubber. And we compared notes on what happened that night. And then he calls over the 4 littlest ones. They're all boys. You, and you, front and center. And they presented themselves to me at the position of parade rest for little boys, and I'm towering. And so what he said to me that day was, so Doc, not only did y'all save my life that night, you also saved theirs. Punchline to this, by the way, is he's now a grandfather. He's okay, or as okay as he could be. Now, why did I tell you that story? Did I tell you that story to illustrate what a wonderful human being I am? No. No. I'm serious. No. You guys, I just happen to be the schmuck who picked up the phone. That's it. That's all. That's all. No more. End of story. Right place, right time. That's it, man. And this is going on every day. This is an endemic problem I am trying to bring to light.
Buddy system.
Huh?
Buddy system.
Buddy system. You got it. And so, the last remark I will make, because I know you guys are just dying to get out of here, make a head call. I see in this room, boy is yours. I see grandfathers, I see fathers, I see brothers, I see uncles, I see maybe some aunties, grandmas, sisters.
Great.
Huh?
Great.
Greats, a couple of greats. Great for you. Thank you. Thank you, George Burns. But also, listen up, and this I cannot be more serious with what I'm about to tell you guys. Also on this day, in addition to all of the above, you listening? I see a force multiplier. I see in this room a force multiplier. What I'm talking about is you don't have to be a psychologist to do it. You don't have to have a bunch of letters after your name. I'm not asking anybody in this room to practice psychology without a license. I am urging everybody in this room to check in on your people. Check in on them daily. Live up to the oath we all swore to uphold. Service continues. Service continues. All right. My last question for all of you today. Who's with me?
Yay!
Thanks you. Thank you all for coming to watch the show. Appreciate it.